Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I am your host, Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we're going to be talking about President Trump and President Zelensky's meeting in the Oval Office and the ongoing budget reconciliation. But before we get started, I'd like to remind you to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you would like to hear an exclusive segment, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host Red Circle.
All right, so to get started, I thought we'd talk about, the news that everybody's been talking about, that recent meeting that Zelensky had with Trump and, some of the other cabinet officials and J.D. Vance in the Oval Office. And, some people have been calling it a blow-up or a fiasco, this
Meltdown.
kind of thing. Meltdown. Yeah. But I just think it was sort of interesting and, to be honest with you, I don't know what Zelensky was really thinking. From what I've looked into and studied about it, it seems like what the Trump administration was offering Zelensky is, something he should have jumped at, done jumping jacks, set off fireworks, been excited.
Mm-hmm.
They were offering basically, we were going to be sort of leasing some of their land in a manner of speaking to do these mineral rights or whatever, to get the rare earth minerals. And Zelensky's point that he was sort of stuck on is he kept saying he wanted assurances.
Like security insurances.
Yeah, but I don't know what he's going for because they were trying to take NATO off the table. Trump was quoted as saying he thinks that that's the NATO issue is what caused all of this in the first place. Now, that's Trump's conjecture. That's, his way of putting it. I think there's probably some truth to it. But he said NATO's absolutely off the table. And Zelensky kept saying, well, we want assurances. We want assurances. Well, if you're going to have American business people, American interests there in the country, don't you think we would defend our own? I mean, we're not going to let Putin or Russia or anybody else be dropping bombs on our own people as we're trying to extract these rare earth minerals and stuff.
Right.
So what more assurances could you have than American personnel in the country?
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. If we're assisting in the mining operations, we obviously have a vested interest in protecting our assets. So, yeah.
But he wants assurances.
Right.
So what assurance? What do you want?
Right, yeah.
I don't understand it. And it was funny. I mean, Trump is who he is, and J.D. Vance is who he is.
Right.
I think it's kind of interesting that they sort of tossed him out of the White House, asked him to leave, go home, pack up your bags, get out. That's sort of interesting. Hardball politics, I guess. I don't know, or negotiating. But Zelensky was immediately, he did a bunch of interviews on several news outlets. He was calling Trump. And now this is according to Trump, but he wanted to come back right away, tail between his legs. I'm sorry, let's talk.
Right.
But Trump just said, I think the guy's kind of playing games. I mean, it's like I just said, what's he really asking for?
Right.
You're sitting there, they had several talks leading up to this. He knew what was being offered.
Yeah.
So I just think it's really interesting. And there's some talk out there about, J.D. Vance and he had provoked Zelensky and all of this. But I just don't buy that. I just think it's a new day. There's a new sheriff in town,
Right.
This administration is running things quite differently. And I'd compare it to, the English Prime Minister, I can't think of his name right now.
Keir Starmer.
Starmer, is that it? Yeah. He was just over, and they had a similar exchange.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the White House. In the Oval Office. The press was there. And J.D. Vance, a member of the press, asked Trump a question about, the speech that J.D. Vance had just given over in Europe. We've covered that just a couple of weeks ago. And Trump said, well, hey, the guy's right here. J.D., do you want to answer this? And J.D. pipes up and says, yeah, I just think there are some issues with free speech in Europe, in England. And the British Prime Minister pipes up and starts saying, oh, well, we've had freedom of speech in our country for a long time, and it's going to stay strong. We've got a strong freedom of speech. Well, that's not true. I would encourage you. I don't have any references right now. I could provide one. There's a British guy. Now I can't think of his name, but there's a guy I watch all the time who put out a video where, he was basically mocking the prime minister, saying, oh, yeah, we've got strong freedom of speech, but people are being put in jail for things they post on Facebook.
Right, yeah.
So give me a break with that, you know? So, I kind of get it. People can feel how they want, but the things that J.D. Vance and Trump are saying are true. So I just don't understand where people are coming from. Maybe the British guy was trying to save face. Zelensky's motivations really baffle me, though. I don't understand where he's coming from, what kind of assurances he wants. He's already been on record as saying that they're willing to give up half the country to Russia. So what does he want from us?
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
So that just kind of baffles me. And I just kind of wanted to get in those points because I don't think it's really the fiasco that some people have called it, but...
Right. Yeah, I kind of got tired of seeing it all over my YouTube feed all weekend. That's just about every video that, related to the news and politics was this whole meeting and how it dissolved.
It was a slow news weekend, that's for sure. Everybody's covered that. But, I just really would love to know. Listeners, we'd love to get your opinion. If somebody could answer for me, what is he looking for? It still just leaves me baffled.
Right? To me, it'd either be more money for weapons or weapons directly, or, military type assets, or like troops on the ground. What other kind of security assurances would he be looking for on those?
Well, I don't know what kind of assurances you're going to get better than, having us there in the country.
Right.
But I think part of it too, this is what Trump is talking about. And the only way I can wrap my head around it is to say that Trump's right. That Zelensky seems like he just wants to keep fighting this war.
Yeah, one of the phrases I heard Trump keep repeating is that he doesn't have any cards. If he makes the deal, he'll have the cards. To I guess beat Putin or have a upper hand against Putin or have a better partnership with us. Whatever it might be.
Well, it's just so interesting because Trump is really pushing for the end of the war.
Right, yeah.
And it seems like Zelensky just wants to keep going. So I guess that's where we're at.
Right. Yeah, and as far as the meeting goes, I was curious at first why this was even on the TV, but I guess it's good to see some of these meetings take place, in person, broadcast to the world.
Well, and I just think it's part of Trump's MO with transparency and everything. And so many things, even from his first administration, he has a conversation with these world leaders and then stuff gets leaked.
Right.
And so I think it's just their way of trying to stay out ahead of stuff. Just do it right in front of the cameras. Do everything in front of the cameras.
Yeah, and I ultimately just thought this was basically diplomacy in action. We're watching the two leaders of a country try to work out a deal right before our eyes, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. It's very, at least in my mind, conceivable that the same thing would have happened even if it was behind closed doors and we didn't see it.
Well, and I just think it's really sort of sad. I mean, there's an element to this that I don't understand, but if this is where we're at an impasse, right? What assurances are they going to get from us now? Being kicked out of the White House, not going to do this mineral deal. Do they think we're just going to keep throwing money at them like the Biden administration did? I don't think so.
Yeah, right.
So who's going to be a better, stronger ally to Ukraine than us?
Right. Well, the Europeans think they will, because pretty much as soon as Zelensky went back home, he met with, I think, France and the leader of France and a couple other countries over there.
The British Prime Minister who was just over here.
Yeah.
He was out there saying, we will back you till the end. Well, good luck with that. They've also got great, strong free speech rights in their country. So, come on.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting development in our foreign policy. We'll see where it goes.
Yep.
So I think the other kind of big story is that the House at least passed their budget, and it included some, I believe, permanent of the Trump tax cuts.
Yeah, but it's going to be a bit of a rigmarole. It came out of the House, but it's going through the reconciliation process. They don't have enough of a majority. The Democrats aren't going to help with this. So it's got to go over to the Senate. The Senate's going to do stuff with it. They're going to send it back to the House. So I don't know how close we are, and we're coming up to a deadline. Funding for the government only lasts through March 14th, which is coming up pretty quickly here. So it's going to be a push, especially with the very narrow margins that they have.
Oh, yeah.
But hopefully it'll get done. It just, there's something in the pit of my stomach that I always hate this, the idea that the government's going to shut down. We're going to go through this where everybody, I mean, how many times have we talked about it here on the channel? This comes up every so often.
Yeah, just about every time they're doing the budget stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you're going to have these people go on furlough, and then the media is going to be all over interviewing these whatever guys who work at Right Pat that can't feed their kids and whatever, all this sob stories and everything. Yeah. Even though as soon as it gets figured out, they all get their back pay and blah, blah, blah. We've covered it on the channel before. But it just makes me nervous because you have some Republicans who are talking about something they're calling a debt spiral. We're in a debt spiral. Yeah, well, maybe we are. But, we've talked about this before, the Rand Paul types and everything.
Right.
I just don't want to see well-meaning Republicans. I'm sure they're well-meaning, debt hawks, whatever you want to call them. I just don't want to see them put the brakes on the Trump administration when we're only a month in, going into month 2.
Right.
And so they're going to stand on their soapbox and say, we're in a debt spiral. That's the new term. That's I linked a Reuters report to this, and that's the new term that they're using in their headlines and everything. So maybe we are in a debt spiral, but I think we're more well poised to address the debt issue with Trump at the helm than anybody else. And the idea that they're just going to put on the brakes now and say, nope, can't move forward, must reduce spending by X number, an arbitrary X number amount of dollars, just makes me nervous. When we've only got, 215 in the House, something like that, maybe 218.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a good day, a majority of 2 seats.
Yeah.
If that, it might even be just 1, I don't know anymore. Because Trump has taken a couple of them into the cabinet and stuff.
Which I still, it is what it is. It's his
Right.
decision to make,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I agree with some of that. Elise Stefanik in particular, she was so good in the House, and
Right.
I miss her. But the lucky thing is that, a long time ago, I think it was under Obama, they changed the reconciliation rule, so you only need a simple majority in both houses.
Mm-hmm.
So we can win it with 51 in the Senate and whatever the number is, 216 in the House. What, I don't know. Don't quote me on that, you know. But we can win it by one vote. But when you have these people talking about their debt spiral, the debt's spiraling out of control, it just makes, I get a pit in my stomach, you know.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Definitely, it's especially since we have so much good momentum going already. It'd be better to try to keep stuff moving now, and then maybe later we can sort some of this other stuff out, like how to better address the debt. But while we still have the majority we have, because that's always the concern right afterwards, because the midterms come up again so soon.
Right.
We might not even have the slim majority that we have. We could lose it. Hopefully we won't, but you never know.
Well, and so it's almost like, I hate to harken back to what we were just talking about, but, these conservative debt hawk type people who are concerned about this debt spiral and where we're at, I just wonder, what do they want? Because already the best thing that they can do with this bill that they're toying around with, they're passing back and forth between the two houses right now, they cap spending at last year's current levels. Basically at, the 2024 levels.
Right.
Well, that's already a step in the right direction, because all these agencies, everything, they always want more.
Right.
Well, at least that's off the table. Nobody's getting a raise.
Right.
So to speak, So, that's already a step in the right direction. How hard do you want to go at the debt when we're only, 35 days? No, it might be a little longer than that, but you get what I'm saying. We're just a little over a month into the Trump administration, and you're going to cut his legs off at the knee?
Right. Yeah, especially if there's a lot of these Republicans are talking about spending cuts, because then the liberals love to drag out that they're immediately going to cut all the benefits like Medicare and Social Security.
Medicaid, yeah.
Yeah, right.
That's their thing they've been harping on about that.
And when Trump has already said he doesn't have any interest in touching it.
Yeah, but that Hakeem Jeffries, man, their people just believe that stuff.
Yeah.
He's out there saying, they are lying to you. They're lying to you.
As if he's not lying.
Exactly. Believe me. Don't believe your lying eyes.
Right. Yeah, so it'd be great to see some of these cuts at some point, but now's not exactly the best time, in my opinion.
Not right now.
Yeah, right.
I've covered it. We've talked about it before. I think, I don't know what it was. Maybe there was a spending package back in December or something. I'm not sure what it was. I'd have to go back. And viewers, you could do that too. You could go back and see the stories that we've been covering over the last year leading into the Trump administration. But, I've said all of this before, that I'm sort of terrified of these Rand Paul types doing this, trying to weaken Trump's momentum going forward. And I just don't think there's anybody better or any administration better to actually address what has caused this debt spiral, their new talking point, than this administration. So I think you just have to stand back, let them do what they're doing. Wish them well.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, as this episode comes out, that budget deadline will be 9 days away, so it remains to see what they'll finally come up with. Hopefully it's not going to be too much crap, because I always love to put in that pork while making these last-minute deals.
Well, Johnson is on record saying that this is supposed to be a clean bill. But,
Right.
Like I
What's that
said,
mean?
this has got to go back and forth between Senate and House.
Right.
Probably like ping pong a couple of times. So who knows what will eventually be put in the bill. You're probably right. But hopefully what they're on record is saying that it's just a clean spending bill. It caps everything at last year's levels. Sounds good to me. Sounds like a good place to start.
Right. Right. I mean, because that at least starts controlling the spending, which, as you said, is a place to start.
Well, and you also have to keep in mind that, Doge is doing its thing, too.
Yeah.
And all of that's going to be litigated. All the excess funds, the fraud, waste, and abuse that they've been looking for and uncovering, that's going to have to be addressed at some point, too. So, but right now it's too early. How long's Doge been doing its thing, 40 days, let's just say. Well, they don't have enough right now to go to Congress and say, look, USAID needs, limited funds. We need to slash their budget by 40% or whatever. They probably don't have that data right now to go to Congress and be able to really address some of the systemic issues in the government, but maybe on the next round.
Right.
So I don't know it's like the Zelensky thing again. I don't know what these quote-unquote debt hawks are really looking for. Not right now.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, we'll move on to smaller stories, not quite as national news making. But it's one I saw that I thought was kind of interesting. In New York recently, there was the U.S. track and field like an open tournament, and it was a women's tournament. And there was a group of the women that were supposed to participate who sat out their race because there was a male competing in their race. A 21-year-old male athlete versus a couple of 16, 17-year-old.
But he claims to be female, right?
Yeah.
I assume. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the big story. A transgender athlete. And we've seen some instances of these before, like some high school girls skipping out of races and stuff because they don't want to compete against males, which, it's terrible that they would have to do so because they practiced hard and trained hard to race. And I also get that they wouldn't want to have to race against the males, so it's kind of a catch-22 situation.
Well,
But
it is.
one of the things that happened in this tournament was this transgender person set records for this particular event, and I think at the maybe at the school that hosted it, something like that. And that just makes me think that at some point, when we finally get on the other side of this, that these records will be stripped from these men who don't deserve them. Because, this isn't the first transgender athlete who's set records against women in their competitions. And, that's just something I had thought about while reading the story, because that, it's, even if these institutions, like the Olympic Committee, change their rules about, men participating in the women's sports, or they go back and correct their records, I'm not sure if they would. Maybe they will. But hopefully they will.
It's really a quagmire.
Yeah.
And this is interesting because this is something we've talked about before too. It's sort of the idea of, that what they call dead naming thing, where they change their name so they're a new person all of a sudden and they never existed as the old person. But it's poppycock, and we brought this up. Bruce Jenner,
Yeah.
he was an Olympian,
Right.
then changes his name to Caitlyn and does the transgender surgery operation thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember asking at the time, and this has been, a while back. Do you remember? He even did a presidential. He was toying around with the idea of running for president
yeah.
and stuff.
Maybe governor, I think.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly the time frame now, but I remember asking the question, well, who won that Olympic gold medal?
Right.
Was it Bruce or Caitlyn?
Mm-hmm.
Now luckily he's somebody who's, this sounds weird because we're in a weird world now, but
Yep.
he sort of has his head on straight, comparatively speaking.
Right. Yeah.
But some of these other things, like you're talking about, the Olympics committee, surely at some point a rational historian would have to put an asterisk and say, due to some crazy rules at the time, they allowed men to blow these females out of the water.
Right.
But I'll just say one last thing I want to get in about that is my favorite person to hear talk about this stuff is Trump. He just does it so well, and I just love him. Maybe I'm biased because I love the way he talks about it, but his example is that female boxer in the Olympics who she tried to go around with that she fella, whatever. And I'm not trying to be discourteous. I don't know all the details or whatever, but I assume it's a he who was, claiming to be a she. But Donald Trump said, she tried to go around with him, but she had to quit, step out, because she didn't want to die.
Yeah. Right?
And imagine, there's all kinds of videos out there. If you're a sane person, the biological differences between men and women are astounding.
Yeah.
They really are. And so this guy, even though she was a boxer, you might say professional, whatever, she's an Olympian, felt like she was in danger of her life going up against this guy. And that's what these crazy people are doing.
Right.
They're putting these women in situations. Now, they're not all, in combative type sports.
Right.
But look at, they've just absolutely ruined some of these fields.
Right. Yeah. They don't even need to be in combative sports. One of the stories, maybe last year or the year before, was a volleyball player who got a ball spiked at her and it hit her right in the face. It permanently damaged her, so she can't play volleyball anymore.
Yeah.
It affected her eyesight, a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that's really sad.
Right.
Well, and then there's ones, not so much even physical harm, even though that's a good point, but the weightlifting one, Trump, yeah. I'm just going to keep citing him because I love hearing him talk about it, but apparently, I don't know at what event, if it was the Olympics, what he's talking about, but, apparently a new record was set by one of these transgender types in weightlifting, where this person outlifted like 100 extra pounds from the last record that had been set.
Right.
Now think of how long it's going to take a real biological female to ever surmount that.
Right. Yeah.
So is that how you're just going to let it stand? Is you're going to let a male in, raise the bar up so high, no woman can ever even come close to it again. And I shouldn't say no woman ever, but
right.
It's going to be a while. It's going to take some effort to beat that.
Right.
I just think it's corrupt. It's unjust. It's It's horrible.
Yeah. And it's terrible to see. Like even in Maine, there's a story about how I think it's the governor in Maine is saying they're not going to abide by Trump's new policies on not allowing males to compete in female sports in schools.
Yeah, that was another one. I agree with Trump 100% on that. He had some kind of a meeting of like the governors at the White House, and he happened to be talking about the governor of Maine, and he says, "Is she here? Is the governor of Maine here?" And she pipes up and says, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, are you gonna conform to this?" And she says, "We're following our state and federal laws guidelines." And he goes, "Well, we are the federal government. You've got to comply with this."
Yeah.
And she says, "We'll see you in court." And he just laughs and says, "Okay, see you in court." He says, "I don't think you're going to be in office too much longer. Because your people don't like this."
No, they don't. So I just thought that whole story out of New York, these women, the young girls sitting out their race, I mean, good for them for trying to make a stand against it, but also it's unfortunate that they have to, since they've all, trained and worked so hard to get to the point to be competing.
Yeah, they're athletes, not protesters.
Right.
So,
yeah, exactly.
It is sad, but at least they're standing up for themselves. Yeah.
Right. And I think this is, slowly, maybe not as quickly as some of us would like, but moving in the right direction. I think more and more people are going to see how silly it is.
Absolutely. Well, I almost even asked, he put out that executive order, so how is this even happening?
I assume since this particular event is, I think, part of the Olympics.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So they don't
that
have
makes
to
sense,
follow it. Yeah.
Well, they're going to have to change their tune, too.
Mm-hmm.
That just ain't going to fly anymore,
Right.
We need more people around the world. We don't need to be the only rational voices.
Right. Yep. So that's all I had on that little story. And I'll have a link to it if anybody else is curious about it.
Well, cool. The last thing to talk about, I don't know if you want to make this
Go for it.
the bonus segment or not.
No, we'll go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, still, even though it's not going to be bonus, we often do have little bonus segments, and we would encourage you guys to become paid subscribers, so you could check those out. But the last sort of thing, it's not really news, but I've heard people talking about it, though. So, it is making news, but on Twitter, Elon Musk has this AI program called Grok, and it's up to Grok 3.0 now. And, we recently had a friend of ours over, a friend of the channel, Dustin, and he was talking to us about Twitter's AI, Grok. And I was just sort of blown away. I mean, at first I put off some of what he said. I said, I don't really believe it, But we got him to test it. And this Grok was doing all kinds of things, answering questions, saying stuff, generating material that ChatGPT would have never said.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think it's interesting. I think you and I have both worked with it a little bit now, tried to get to know it. And I have to say, not only is it less politically correct or whatever, but it's also just more helpful. I mean, one of the things I kept telling to Dustin that night was there were so many times I would ask ChatGPT to do something and it would just tell me, no, I can't do that.
Right.
And this Grok, I mean, even if it doesn't want to be very helpful, it still tells you something. It doesn't just say no and you hit a brick wall.
Right.
So, I mean, that to me is already a level above ChatGPT. Some people love it for the politically incorrect stuff. They can get it to make pictures or memes or things, say stuff that ChatGPT would never say. But what were your thoughts having worked with it a little bit now?
I definitely enjoy that it is a little less restrictive. I mean, because there's even some silly stuff that ChatGPT won't do. Like, even with animals, it won't depict harm to animals in any kind of way if you want it to. And not that I don't feel like I should have to say, but I certainly don't advocate any harm to animals. But when you're trying to think of something kind of funny and wacky that we might use on our other show, the Wiki Wacky Radio Show.
which you should check out and
Yes.
subscribe to.
ChatGPT won't do it. So you kind of have to tell it, like, wiggle your way through it by, like, saying, oh, they're just cartoons, or use a cartoon character whose name is Turkey instead of a turkey to get it to do stuff. Now, I haven't specifically tested things like that on Grok, but like you were mentioning, we did test other things while Dustin was with us that ChatGPT definitely did not do, that Grok did do.
Yeah, and I don't want to give the specific example, but
Right.
you know me. I have a bad habit of sometimes seeing stuff in black and white. I take stuff to the extreme sometimes.
Right.
And we tested it on an extreme point. I don't want to discuss it here, but he did it. Grok did something that ChatGPT would have never done in a million years. And I think, just to sort of put a cherry on top and help illustrate this point, I mean, your example was very good, but something as simple as, we did, just to plug the Wiki Wacky radio show again, one of our latest segments was we did like famous last lines. Now, I guess ChatGPT didn't know this, but we weren't just saying like famous last lines like as people were dying on their deathbed, the last things that they said. I think there was an element of that, but we also did famous last lines from movies, famous last lines from books. There are other extrapolations of famous last words or whatever we stated it as than just somebody on their deathbed. And I had asked ChatGPT to generate a thumbnail image related to a podcast segment on famous last lines. And he started to do it. You could see the little picture pop up. He started to generate an image, but then it just stopped. And he said, I can't do that. And I said, why? That doesn't make any sense. And he said, it seems that you've hit I don't have the text in front of me, but he says, it seems like you've hit on our guidelines about death and morbidity. And that kind of thing just makes me want to fly off the handle and break my laptop, because who said anything about death or morbidity?
Right, yeah.
And you just telling me, no, you can't generate an image. You can't find some kind of workaround. I told him, I said, imagine it as famous quotes then. And then he could generate me an image.
Yeah, I get that's the beauty of the free market. I mean, people are going to make competing programs and services, and people are going to choose, and we're choosing. Well, I mean, I'm certainly probably going to use Grok more to help do some things. I use, we've basically said here we've used ChatGPT to help come up with some ideas, or help make things a little quicker.
Or just fluff up certain pieces.
Right. But I'll probably start switching over. Because one of the things I did this morning, just out of curiosity, I asked Grok without any other prompts. My first prompt was, can you tell me about the Wiki Wacky radio show? And it gave me a very detailed description of our podcast. I was quite surprised at it. Even specific elements about, like, one of our episodes when we drove out to Denver. It even mentioned that in its description, which was mind-blowing to me. And then in the same chat session, I wanted to get an idea for our next episode. And I said, I am one of the hosts of the podcast. Give me some ideas I can use for the show. And Grok replied in his first line, said, hey, Frank or Reid. So I thought that was kind of playful and fun. I'm not sure if I've ever really noticed that kind of
sort of camaraderie.
Yeah, I was about to say, dare I say, personality.
Yeah.
I don't really like saying that when talking about a computer program, but that's kind of what it gives it.
Well, I can tell you, I'll never use ChatGPT again, just because it frustrated me so many times. And now this Grok is like a breath of fresh air. But to do the flip side of the coin, I am a writer type, and I've played around having it try to write me some little pieces and stuff, and I still don't think it's very creative as far as, how a human would be creative and come up
Sure.
with ideas and adapt stories and give twists and turns and that kind of thing. And I'm still running into some of the same issues as with ChatGPT
Right.
on the generative side, because I'll say, like you, give me an idea about this, and it'll give me a list of like 10 things. Okay. And I'll say, okay, point 2 is really good. Can you fluff that out? Can you fill that out? Give me more. And it doesn't really do much more. It just kind of gives me what it already gave me. And then I'll say, can you make it a dialogue between 2 people? And
Right.
instead of changing anything, it just literally adapts the text as a dialogue. And it's
Right.
like, it's like I have to sit there and walk it through. It's like I have to write it myself still. 'Cause I
Yeah,
have to walk it through
I've
exactly what I
experienced
want.
stuff like that. It's almost like, it keeps looping back to itself too much.
Yeah.
It's almost like you have to, take the best part of what you've already been given and then start a whole new
Yes.
chat with that info and have it fix it up more. So it's not like, keeps referring back to itself and making a mess of it.
Yeah, that's very apt. But
Yeah.
even when I say, okay, that's very good, add more,
Right.
it struggles with that. Like, it's like, well, I already came up with this. What more do you want?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really give that sass talk, it doesn't have that kind of personality, but you can read it. I'm reading the stuff. I've just said, add more, fluff this up. And I read it and it's the same stuff it already just told me. It didn't change anything. It didn't add anything. There's maybe a lot more ands and these and thes and, that kind of thing. But there's nothing more substantive there.
Right.
So anyway, I think I'll look forward to Grok 4.0, but
Yeah, that's a thing I was going to say. They're all still developing in ways. Even though some of this stuff has been in the works for, a decade-ish, we're still, we're still working on it. Just like it took a couple of decades for the internet to become what it even is. It's all in progress. I think some of our frustrations are just the limitations of what they can do.
yeah. I agree with all of that. I just, I happen to get frustrated more easily than some other people,
Yeah.
but it is a breath of fresh air compared to ChatGPT. So
Yeah.
that's
right.
just something, maybe a discussion point. Maybe if any of you have tried them both, you can give us
Or
your
any
thoughts.
other AI programs.
Yeah, if there's one that's better, Frank here would love to know
Yeah.
what it is.
Right? With that, I do have a quick little bonus segment that we'll move into briefly. And if you would like to hear it, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle. We would greatly appreciate it. And listeners, if you have enjoyed this great conservative conversation, please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can find us on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, and many other major podcast listening platforms. You can also go subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can leave us a comment and share. I'm taking all of Frank's lines here.
Yep.
And if you want to hear that exclusive bit, be sure to become a paid subscriber through our podcast host for Red Circle.
That's right. And we hope that you would encourage a friend to do the same, or maybe 2. We'd love to grow. We'd love you to help us grow. So anything you could do, like Reid just said, giving the thumbs up, leaving a comment, sharing us through the app, that kind of thing. Those are just free ways that you could help us out. It really tickles the algorithm and makes it happy so that our videos, especially on YouTube, will be promoted to other viewers who haven't watched us before. So, and as always, we thank you for listening.